who has the pluck to make the manufacturer stop it. There are here a great many honest hand weavers suffering through this damned system. Here is one sample from a good many out of the noble-hearted free trade clique. There is a manufacturer who has upon himself the curses of the whole district on account of his infamous conduct towards his poor weavers. If they have got a piece ready which comes to 34 or 36 shillings, he gives them 20s in money and the rest in cloth or goods, and 40 to 50% dearer than at the other shops, and often enough the goods are rotten into the bargain. But, what says the Free Trade Mercury, the Leeds Mercury? They are not bound to take them, they can please themselves. Oh, yes, but they must take them or else starve. If they ask for another 20s in money, they must wait 8 or 14 days for a warp, but if they take the 20s and the goods, then there is always a warp ready for them. And that is free trade. Lord Brougham said we ought to put by something in our young days, so that we need not go to the parish, when we are old. Well, are we to put by the rotten goods? If this did not come from a lord, one would say his brains were as rotten as the goods that our work is paid in. When the unstamped papers came out illegally, there was a lot of them to report it to the police in Holmfirth, the Blythes, the Edwards, etc., but where are they now? But this is different. Our truck manufacturer belongs to the pious free trade lot. He goes to church twice every Sunday, and repeats devotedly after the parson, we have left undone the things we ought to have done, and we have done the things we ought not to have done, and there is no good in us, but, good Lord, deliver us. Yes, deliver us till tomorrow, and we will pay our weavers again in rotten goods. The cottage system looks much more innocent, and arose in a much more harmless way, though it has the same enslaving influence upon the employee. In the neighborhood of the mills in the country, there is often a lack of dwelling accommodation for the operatives. The manufacturer is frequently obliged to build such dwellings, and does so gladly, as they yield great advantages, besides the interest upon the capital invested. If any owner of working men's dwellings averages about 6% on his invested capital, it is safe to calculate that the manufacturer's cottages yield twice this rate, for so long as his factory does not stand perfectly idle he is sure of occupants, and of occupants who pay punctually. He is therefore spared the two chief disadvantages under which other house owners labor: his cottages never stand empty, and he runs no risk. But the rent of the cottages is as high as though these disadvantages were in full force, and by obtaining the same rent as the ordinary house owner, the manufacturer, at cost of the operatives, makes a brilliant investment at 12 to 14%. For it is clearly unjust that he should make twice as much profit as other competing house owners, who at the same time are excluded from competing with him. But it implies a double wrong when he draws his fixed profit from the pockets of the non-possessing class, which must consider the expenditure of every penny. He is used to that, however, he whose whole wealth is gained at the cost of his employees. But this injustice becomes an infamy when the manufacturer, as often happens, forces his operatives, who must occupy his houses on pain of dismissal, to pay a higher rent than the ordinary one, or even to pay rent for houses in which they do not live. The Halifax Guardian, quoted by the Liberal Sun, asserts that hundreds of operatives in Ashton-under-Lyne, Oldham, and Rochdale, etc., are forced by their employers to pay house rent, whether they occupy the house or not. 184. The cottage system is universal in the country districts. It has created whole villages, and the manufacturer usually has little or no competition against his houses, so that he can fix his price regardless of any market rate, indeed at his pleasure. And what power does the cottage system give the employer over his operatives in disagreements between master and men? If the latter strike, he need only give them notice to quit his premises, and the notice need only be a week. After that time the operative is not only without bread, but without a shelter, a vagabond at the mercy of the law, which sends him, without fail, to the treadmill. Such is the factory system, sketched as fully as my space permits, and with as little partisan spirit as the heroic deeds of the bourgeoisie against the defenseless workers permit, deeds towards which it is impossible to remain indifferent, towards which indifference were a crime. Let us compare the condition of the free Englishman of 1845 with the Saxon serf under the lash of the Norman barons of 1145. The serf was glebe ad scriptus, bound to the soil. So is the free working man through the cottage system. The serf owed his master the jus primi noctis, the right of the first night. The free working man must, on demand, surrender to his master not only that, but the right of every night. The serf could acquire no property; everything that he gained, his master could take from him. The free working man has no property, can gain none by reason of the pressure of competition, and what even the Norman baron did not do, the modern manufacturer does. Through the truck system, he assumes every day the administration in detail of the things which the worker requires for his immediate necessities. The relation of the lord of the soil to the serf was regulated by the prevailing customs and by laws which were obeyed, because they corresponded to them. The free working man's relation to his master is regulated by laws which are not obeyed, because they correspond neither with the interests of the employer nor with the prevailing customs. The lord of the soil could not separate the serf from the land, nor sell him apart from it, and since almost all the land was fief and there was no capital, practically could not sell him at all. The modern bourgeois forces the working man to sell himself. The serf was the slave of the piece of land on which he was born. The working man is the slave of his own necessaries of life, and of the money with which he has to buy them, both the slaves of a thing. The serf had a guarantee for the means of subsistence in the feudal order of society in which every member had his own place. The free working man has no guarantee whatsoever, because he has a place in society, only when the bourgeoisie can make use of him. In all other cases he is ignored, treated as non-existent. The serf sacrificed himself for his master in war, the factory operative in peace. The lord of the serf was a barbarian who regarded his villein as a head of cattle. The employer of operatives is civilized, and regards his hand as a machine. In short, the position of the two is not far from equal, and if either is at a disadvantage, it is the free working man. Slaves they both are, with a single difference, that the slavery of the one is undissembled, open, honest, that of the other cunning, sly, disguised, deceitfully concealed from himself, and every one else, a hypocritical servitude worse than the old. The philanthropic Tories were right when they gave the operatives the name white slaves. But the hypocritical disguised slavery recognizes the right to freedom, at least in outward form, bows before a freedom-loving public opinion, and herein lies the historic progress as compared with the old servitude, that the principle of freedom is affirmed, and the oppressed will one day see to it, that this principle is carried out. 186. The remaining branches of industry. We were compelled to deal with the factory system somewhat at length, as it is an entirely novel creation of the industrial period. We shall be able to treat the other workers the more briefly, because what has been said either of the industrial proletariat in general, or of the factory system in particular, will wholly, or in part, apply to them. We shall, therefore, merely have to record how far the factory system has succeeded in forcing its way into each branch of industry, and what other peculiarities these may reveal. The four branches comprised under the Factory Act are engaged in the production of clothing stuffs. We shall do best, if we deal next with those workers, who receive their materials from these factories, and, first of all, with the stocking weavers of Nottingham, Derby, and Leicester. Touching these workers, the Children's Employment Commission reports that the long working hours, imposed by low wages, with the sedentary life and the strain upon the eyes, involved in the nature of the employment, usually enfeeble the whole frame, and especially the eyes. Work at night is impossible without a very powerful light produced, by concentrating the rays of the lamp, making them pass through glass globes, which is most injurious to the sight. At 40 years of age, nearly all wear spectacles. The children employed at spooling and hemming usually suffer grave injuries to the health and constitution. They work from the 6th, 7th, or 8th year 10 to 12 hours daily in small, close rooms. It is not uncommon for them to faint at their work, to become too feeble for the most ordinary household occupation, and so near-sighted as to be obliged to wear glasses during childhood. Many were found by the commissioners to exhibit all the symptoms of a scrofulous constitution, and the manufacturers usually refuse to employ girls who have worked in this way as being too weak. The condition of these children is characterized as a disgrace to a Christian country, and the wish expressed for legislative interference. The Factory Report 189 adds that the stocking weavers are the worst paid workers in Leicester, earning 6, or with great effort, 7 shillings a week, for 16 to 18 hours daily work. Formerly they earned 20 to 21 shillings, but the introduction of enlarged frames has ruined their business. The great majority still work with old small single frames, and compete with difficulty with the progress of machinery. Here too, every progress is a disadvantage for the workers. Nevertheless, Commissioner Power speaks of the pride of the stocking weavers, that they are free, and had no factory bell to measure out the time for their eating, sleeping,